Personally, camping is one of my favorite things to do. I like to primitive camp myself, but I know there are some others that are not a big fan of that. You can go glamping, as they call it, or even in an RV if you want to call that camping. No matter what you call camping, there are some creepy experiences that can happen out in the outdoors. These subscribers sent in what they claim to be true experiences while camping. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit your experience at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this show going. Now, without further ado, sit back, relax, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and get ready for some creepy as hell encounters in the woods. My name is Colin, and I live in the great state of Florida. My friends whose privacy I want to respect will be known from here on out as Mandy, Gretchen, and Dylan. The three of us have been friends since preschool, but we really became close when the four of us stayed on the playground after the teachers told us to come inside because we were observing a green frog clinging to a clown thing attached to the slide. After about a minute of staring at it, the frog jumped on Mandy's face and scared the living crap out of her. Gretchen, Dylan, and I laughed so hard, and our teacher had to come get the frog off of Mandy. Eventually, she got over it, and the four of us hung out more and started to do it outside of school. After birthdays, we would have sleepovers and have camping nights in separate tents in each of our backyards. It was the best part of my young childhood. But now to skip to years later, and the four of us are all still best friends in high school, with all of us still hanging out during lunch and after school. The only difference now is we sometimes go camping in the woods near Dylan's house. We used to do it regularly, like once a month on a weekend when it worked best for all of us, but we don't really do that anymore, not after what happened one night in October. The four of us had planned to go on this night when I was home from my dad's house and the other three had no obligations. We brought our tents and had enough food for us to pig out for the night and go to sleep with food babies, which is what we like to call our full stomachs. It's pretty cliche, I know. So after setting up in a small clearing and starting a campfire, we decided to make s'mores and tell spooky campfire stories. Gretchen told my favorite one about this teacher who goes to bed and sometime during the night a killer breaks in and kills her dog and hangs him in the bathtub. Throughout the night, the lady keeps hearing a dripping noise and keeps getting out of bed to tighten the faucets in her house until she finds the dog in her tub and turns around to find the killer with a knife. You can guess what happens from there. But the disturbing part of the story is before it's revealed that it was the dog hanging in the bathtub, the second time the lady gets up to check for the dripping, she feels a tongue licking her fingers, and obviously, it's the psycho doing it. It's disturbing in its own way, but always gave me chills and I love it. After a few more stories, Mandy wants us to turn in so we can get up and do her favorite hiking trail that she made in the morning. So Dylan and I go into our tent. Some things happened between preschool and the present time, and we had started hanging out. So we cuddled up in this sleeping bag and tried to stay warm on this late, chilly October. I'll spare the, homophobic people writing hate comments in the chat any details of what happened in the next 15 minutes, but it was magical for me. Anyways, we eventually finished what we were doing and began to rest into his sleeping bag, cuddled up. I don't know how much longer I fell asleep, but Dylan woke me up. He did it in a quiet panic. He placed his hand over my mouth and whispered into my ear that there were people outside of our tent, rummaging through our cooler. My heart started to beat faster as I saw the silhouette of a stranger, and to me, it didn't look like a normal person. It looked like a moving boulder. I was so scared. I just faced Dylan and buried my face in his shirt. I'm not one to get scared easily, but I felt exposed and unsafe. This person or more apt, this thing, was going through our stuff like it owned the forest, and all of this was their domain and kingdom. After what felt like forever, I heard our zipper start to move and felt Dylan hold me tightly. I couldn't see much, but from what I did see, this thing was not a man or an animal. It was a demon. It had a face of a deformed acid victim with the eyes of absolute hell. They were this piercing white color, and even in the dark I could feel the hot gaze of them burn into me. The hand this monster put out, as if reaching for us, was hairy and accompanied by long claws that ended in a very sharp point. It seemed as if it was about to touch us when all of a sudden, a loud cop siren jolted it back out of our tent and scrambled into the night. Gretchen and Mandy saw this thing looking into our tent and pulled up an app on her phone to play a cop siren that she used to use to scare her family. After she stopped the siren, Dylan jumped out of the sleeping bag and picked me up before I could stand and started running us towards the house, which was about 10 minutes walking distance from our campsite. At this pace, we made it back there within 6 minutes. Followed by Gretchen and Mandy, we got the spare key hidden inside the flower bed and went into his kitchen through the back door. The rest of the night I tried to stay awake until I fell asleep on the couch with Dylan and Mandy, but Gretchen wouldn't let herself sleep after that. Mandy and Dylan went back while I stayed with Gretchen and asked her what she saw that scared her into insomnia. This is what she told me yesterday when I asked again. I peeked out of my tent, and in the small embers of the fire, I saw the body of a giant black man attached to the legs of a deer with webbed feet. I saw that it was leaning inside closer, and I pulled out my siren app, and as I started it up, it ran faster than anything I've ever seen into the darkness. I know this might not have been the most exciting story you have ever read, but to me and my fiancé Dylan, this will always be our scariest and most horrifying experience. It was late July when my cousins invited me to go camping for 3 nights. We made this a yearly tradition so that we could stay in touch, but to also enjoy the outdoors and practice our survival skills. This year going, it was only me, Ian, Aaron, Nate, Lewis, and their 2 friends, Leon and Zeke. Joe would have come, but he canceled on us last minute without really giving any reason. However, I think he made the smartest decision. This story you are about to hear is all true from my memory and was written in my journal. I hope anyone hearing this will be more cautious when camping deep in the woods. Day 1. I woke up early in the morning to prepare for our big trip. It was a hot and sunny day, perfect to be outside. My uncle asked me to vacuum the boat before we left so that we wouldn't have any insects crawling on us. After that was done, we all packed our equipment into Ian's car and drove away. We arrived at the boat launch and boated out onto a lake just a little bit after afternoon, and we began searching for a remote campsite. The first day, it was all of us going except for Lewis and Zeke, because they were busy with work and they were going to meet us there the next day. Almost 30 minutes of boating around, we found a spot that was just hidden enough and could dock 2 boats on its quote-unquote shore, which was really just a large rock. It took us a while to unload all of our luggage and equipment onto the campsite, and we even had to carry some of it up a tall hill to place our tents. It was getting late, and the mosquitoes were abundant in these woods. So Aaron, Nate, and I set up the tents in a hurry to get back down to the shore. When we rushed back down the hill, we found that Ian and Leon had already set up the campfire, tarp, lawn chairs, and a meal for us. It was a great relief because we were bitten everywhere, getting cold, and starving. As comfortable as we sounded at this time, things were a little sketchy because this location was very remote and far from civilization and rescue. At the time we began to eat, it was already pitch dark, and we had to rely on our headlamps and campfire for light. We had pork chops and Caesar salad. Lots of Caesar salad. The struggle to eat was real because we had a messy meal with minimal light, and mosquitoes were flying into our meals every other place you could imagine. To distract ourselves, we told scary stories about the legends of the forest. This one story that Aaron told us was about the Lady of the Woods. Legend has it, she was a young girl who went camping with her father in this same part of the woods. One night, she told her father that she was tired and heading back to their tent. Her father willingly understood and said he'd stay back to put out the fire. Crickets and the light breeze of wind were the only things to be heard. The girl walked off, and it had only been a few minutes. Just as the father put out the fire, he suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream, followed by a whoop, roar, and a noise of a tree coming down. And then, silence. It was too dark to see anything, and the father panicked. He called out his daughter's name, but got no response. Minutes passed of silence, and the father's adrenaline rushed through his entire body. Just as Aaron was getting to the good part of the story, we suddenly heard bushes start to rustle and branches snap. I looked around and noticed that Nate was missing. I thought he was pulling a prank on us, so I said, "Ha, nice try, but you aren't scaring me." I got no response though. The noises in the bush stopped and we were starting to get seriously concerned. We began calling out his name, and there was still no sound to be heard. I ran over to the path that leads up to our tent, and that is what I wish I didn't do. With my headlamp, looking down at my feet was what looked like Nate's shoe prints in the dirt. I followed the prints and they abruptly ended at the top of the hill. There, right where the shoe prints stopped, beside them were two other prints. Footprints. They were big. I hadn't seen any footprint that shape and size in my life until then. I called everyone over to me and had them check it out. Aaron had one quick glimpse at the footprint and said, "This is what got the girl." We all looked at him nervously. "This was the Bigfoot," he said. We sat there in shock. Nobody had their doubts about this being abnormal, knowing that Nate was probably dead because of that Bigfoot or whatever it was. The group figured there was no point in searching now, because it was much too dark and too dangerous. But Ian, he had other plans. He told us he was going to strangle this creature himself, and before he had time to react, he already ran off, following the footprints. Everyone yelled at him to come back, and we would search in the morning, but he was already too far into the forest. This camping trip had now become a disaster, and already two of my cousins were gone in the deep forest. It was around 11 p.m., and we returned to the lower area of the camp, and we started to load our food back into the boats to protect it from bears, and what we assumed to be a Bigfoot. So much was going through our minds, and we didn't sleep at all. Day 2. In the morning, everyone got out of their tents, and we agreed to pack up and leave. As much as we wanted to go searching for the others, we knew that they were already dead, or who knows what. Leon packed everything into the two boats, but there was a slight problem. Both motors for the boats were missing, and we didn't bring paddles. There was panic among us, so we tried calling Zeke and Lewis to warn them not to come, as well as attempting to call the police for help. But who would have guessed? There was no cell service. That was it. We thought we were all going to die. This Bigfoot took one of my cousins, and, apparently, took two of my boat motors. I sat on a rock by the shore. We pretty much all accepted our fate, waiting to see if Zeke and Lewis would arrive on their boat, and maybe we could make it out alive. That's what I thought. Hours passed, and we had not eaten since the night before. It was getting dark again, but eventually, I heard a boat heading in the direction of our camp. As the boat got closer, I could recognize the voices because Zeke was yelling, "Full send for the boys!" one of his common phrases. I could also see Lewis driving the boat and cringing, but he wouldn't have to much longer. I waved my hands around and screamed for help. Everyone else did the same. As they pulled their boat in, they were confused to see our boats loaded and us running towards them. I explained the situation about the Bigfoot and how it probably already claimed the lives of Nate and Ian. They didn't believe us and thought we were trying to set them up for a prank. There was true fear in our faces. Zeke and Lewis climbed ashore anyway. The two wanted to eat supper, but we were not going to take out the food, as for we knew what it would attract. Aaron and Leon said that we needed to leave. Neither Zeke or Lewis wanted to go. It became pitch black outside again, and Lewis had already set up a fire. Zeke was a crazy redneck that loved explosives, so he ran to their boat and started throwing small propane tanks onto shore. Everyone else quickly asked what he was doing, and before we knew it, he already thrown 2 tanks into the campfire. Panic once again set into everyone as we watched Zeke laugh like a maniac. Everyone but Zeke had run back to the only boat with a motor, and just as we got into the boat and yelled his name, the propane tank exploded with a large ball of fire, and for a split second, we saw it. The light from the explosion cast a shadow on the creature, the Bigfoot. The fire disappeared after we heard yelling from Zeke. Without any hesitation, Aaron started the boat, and us, the remaining survivors, got the heck out of there. We heard the chilling roar from the Bigfoot just as we fled, and it's a sound none of us will ever forget. Ever since that day, we've never gone camping again. First, I'd like to say that you're one of my favorite YouTubers. Now to finally tell my story for people who actually might believe me. This took place mostly in 2017 to 2018 in Gilpin County, Colorado. I was out camping with my dad in July, and I went on a solo walk down a trail by my campsite. I would almost immediately regret this decision. I started hearing weird calls or screams coming from the woods all around me. I didn't think too much of it at first, because the area is known for coyotes, and well, it's the Rockies. Then I started hearing twigs snapping all around me, and I felt as if I was being watched intently. The trail wasn't a loop, so I had to turn around to get back. I suddenly heard my dad calling for me. "Come back to the camp, it's time to eat." But it sounded so wrong, like a 50s radio. It was distorted and static-like. I thought of continuing, but my anxiety kicked in, and I turned around and bolted back to my campsite. I have never run so fast in my life. Then I started hearing louder screaming, and almost like it was stomping behind me. I finally reached the campsite, and nothing too crazy happened for the rest of this particular trip. I quickly forgot all about it, and around 3 months later, after nothing had happened, the cliché of October came. By then, I had moved about 6 miles away from the campsite and was finally relaxed because I loved the woods. My view on life had changed when, one night, I heard tap, tap, tap on my window one night. Okay, whatever, it's the wind. After it happened a second night, I thought, okay, that's a little weird. Then after 3 nights, I was so sick of it, I looked up at the window, and I wish I never had. I saw a deer, but this deer was on its hind legs. Its face was half decayed with flesh hanging off of it. I still don't know how, but it doesn't seem like it saw me. I turned my head slowly and tried to forget about it. Sleep did not find me that night, and the tapping kept happening until around mid-December. Again, it's like it just disappeared. Now, this next story has 2 others in it. My friend Jay and my other friend A. Now, my small town had a rec center, but being in Gilpin, it was surrounded by forest, and well, it's just a very calming place to hang out. My friends and I are still atheists and were atheists at that time, so they didn't believe me when I told them about the incident. In March of 2018, it was snowing and a fresh layer was on the ground. My friends and I decided to go on a walk through the trail by the rec center. I had heard odd screams like the ones I heard at the campsite, but my friends were convinced that it was just a mountain lion. Jay said it was nothing to be a scaredy cat about. A just silently agreed with him. They were wrong, and they would soon find that out. Jay started yelling to try to scare whatever was screaming. The screaming stopped, but so did everything else. We all looked at each other. Then A tapped on my shoulder and pointed to our right, that she saw something strange. Jay whispered silently, "I believe you now." We all slowly backed away, and it turned and smiled. I swear, this thing smiled so big it was ear to ear. It's almost as if this thing could hear each other's thoughts, but it never followed us. A couple of months later, I moved to Denver, and I've not seen anything creepy since, and I have honestly refused to go camping. I've done some investigations online, and the only thing I can come up with is potentially a Wendigo. I listen to the Swamp Dweller podcast all the time, and I've heard plenty of similar experiences, and I thank you for sharing mine. Everyone loves a good scary story, so here's mine. First, a little background. I live in Utah and I go camping a lot. I've got it pretty much down to a wrinkle. Usually I do a bunch of research on the areas where I plan to camp, even missing persons in the area or unidentified remains that have been found, accidents, anything creepy of note, because I love macabre stuff like that. I was coming down from Salt Lake and wanted to visit my great-grandfather's ghost town, which is unfortunately all on private property now. Apparently so is Castle Gate Cemetery. If you don't know about the Castle Gate or Winter Quarters mining disasters, you should read about it. The Castle Gate Cemetery contains the remains of 171 men who died in a series of mine explosions on March 8, 1924. It's just really eerie, seeing the same date of death on all of those grave markers. It was a very small town, and almost all men of working age died that day, leaving almost every woman in that town a widow. The bodies were unrecognizable aside from some bits of clothing, so there aren't many names along with the grave markers. Just a white cross with March 8th, 1924 inscribed on them. Anyway, my story isn't about that. My final camping destination was near Vernal, so I had to take a scenic route to get there. I really enjoyed the drive though, so I started taking it more often on many trips to the Vernal area. Recently, my fiancée Colby and I noticed pretty sweet looking camping spots along the way, so we decided to camp there last month. It was great, beautiful, and easy to access for my SUV. I prefer to camp as far away from people as possible, while still having my car nearby, so this spot was ideal. I hadn't noticed any signs except that we were camping in the Ashley National Forest, which is weird, because I always thought the Ashley Forest was closer to Flaming Gorge. It's just really big. Colby and I love camping, so we decided to take his 12-year-old son Kyle with us for Father's Day weekend. Kyle had never been camping before. That night before we were due to leave, I just couldn't sleep at all. I had an abnormally long anxiety attack, which, unabated by my anxiety medicine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something awful was going to happen. I spent the morning crying and shaking, wondering if what I was experiencing was a legitimate gut feeling, or if it was just my mental illness causing me to think irrationally. I voiced my fears as Colby also experiences anxiety, and he is incredibly understanding when my mental illness gets rough. I didn't want to ruin Father's Day for him or our kiddo, and they were very set on going. I eventually calmed down and we arrived at our spot after about 2.5 hours of driving. There were no other people around, which was fantastic. The area is home to a lot of free-range cows, and there happened to be a ton of them around our campsite. They kept their distance and we left them alone, but we had a plan to jump in the car if they got too close or a bull came along. The weather was perfect. There weren't too many bugs, and aside from the cow patties and incessant lowing of cattle, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Clearly, my anxiety was just that, anxiety. We each set out to prepare the camp. The boys focused on the fire pit and gathering wood while I set up the tent and inflated the air mattresses. We planned to sleep in the tent while Kyle slept in the car on a twin-sized air mattress, so we could be plenty comfortable and safe. We have a decent amount of gear, so the spot was pretty awesome once it was all set up. We even hung up a string of solar-powered lights for when it got dark. Around this time, a very large bull came along, so we had a chance to implement our emergency plan of getting in the car just in case. He just kind of herded the cows away from our area. It was nice having the cows gone, as the sun was setting. All we still needed to make this great was dinner, so I started working on that while Kyle hung out in the back of the car on his mattress, snuggling up on a blanket, as he had been saying he was tired and wanted to take a nap. Colby and I went out to gather more wood, and though we didn't mention it to each other at the time, we both felt very uncomfortable. We didn't want to go too far from the campsite or split up. We just had this weird feeling of being watched, like something was lurking behind the many bushes around us. I attributed it to a stray cow or maybe some deer. We returned to the campsite less than 5 minutes later. Sunset was gorgeous from what we could see in the clouds, and this was about the time that Kyle got up and wanted to wander around. I totally understand wanting to roam around and explore as a kid, so that was normal. He started walking off in one direction, and his dad said, "Where are you going?" To which Kyle responded, "Places." He then turned around and walked to the tent, like that's what he wanted to check out. Maybe 20 minutes later he said he saw some eyes reflecting in the trees behind us, and was going to check it out. I just laughed and said nope. Besides, dinner is going to be ready in another 20 minutes or so. I thought maybe he'd just seen another cow or a deer, no big deal. He and his dad were on the other side of the car when I pulled dinner off the grill. I stood up to tell them that it was ready and we could finally dive into a tasty tinfoil dinner of chicken, potatoes, broccoli, carrots, shallots, and garlic. Not to brag, but I make a damn fine campfire dinner. It was incredibly dark, the kind of dark that only really remote places can get before the moon rises. So we were using our flashlights pretty heavily. I did a quick scan around with my flashlight, and straight ahead of me, a stone's throw away, about 5 to 6 feet off the ground, I saw a pair of eyes reflecting back, just staring at me. These were not the eyes of any animal. They couldn't have been a cow, deer, elk, bear, or a mountain lion. They just barely were reflecting, and they were very close together. They looked distinctly human. There's a person just staring at us in the middle of nowhere. They didn't make any noise getting there, and they did it in the dark without a light. My stomach sank, and every hair on my body stood on end. I called out and said something like, "Babe, come look at this," because I was unsure of what I was actually seeing. As I partially turned to look at my fiance, my flashlight left the eyes and I immediately whipped it back over. The eyes were still there, just staring. That's when I realized how real this actually was. Most animals would have bolted away after that, and a cow would have made a noise getting there. I was frozen, my eyes trying as hard as they could to see any form in the darkness. As Colby came around the car to me, the thing stood up unnaturally quick, and the eyes went from about 10 feet off the ground. Still staring at me, that's it. A human is scary enough, but some 10 or 11 foot tall humanoid creature with that kind of speed is beyond terrifying. I backed up and yelled, "Get in the car, now!" And my voice was shaking. My lovely, obedient son for the first time in his life didn't ask any questions and just hopped in the car. I threw myself in the back with him and Colby. As I piled some bags in the driver's seat, stupid, I know, I quickly described what I saw. I noticed I was physically shaking. I'm not the toughest chick around, but I've been through a lot of stuff I probably shouldn't have survived. I've done solo camping trips and solo hikes, and I've never been spooked. I've been snorkeling in the ocean at night and seen eyes reflecting, or eels and stonefish within a foot or two of me, and I might shiver a bit, but that's nothing compared with the absolute terror I felt upon those eyes rapidly ascending. Colby quickly moved the bags and climbed into the driver's seat. He started the car and turned on the high beams. We couldn't see anything, but we knew we needed to leave. We pulled the car right up to the tent, grabbed our machetes, and told Kyle to stay in the car no matter what. Colby covered me while I grabbed the bags of our clothes out of the tent, and I doused the fire with a few gallons of water, and thankfully, we got out of there. Needless to say, we flew out of there like a bat out of hell, leaving the tent cooler and dinner still steaming on the grill. The drive down the pitch-dark canyon was nerve-wracking. After we had all been silent for a bit, trying to make sense of the situation, Kyle asked, "What color were the eyes that you saw?" I responded that they were light bluish green. He said, "That's what I saw too." I asked him how far apart the eyes looked. He said they were close together like a human's would be. I know that human eyes reflected red though, so it could have been a human. Or it could have been something else, I guess. I don't know how many 10-foot tall people there are in the world. We eventually pulled over at a well-lit gas station when we got to the nearest town and booked a hotel room for the night. On our way there, we noticed a car following us closely. We were already unnerved, and Colby slowed down a bit just in case they were wanting to pass us. Then we saw the red and blue lights blinding us through the mirrors. He pulled over and an officer told us we were going about 10 under the speed limit and asked where we came from and where we were going, so we told him the truth. We knew it sounded insane. We hadn't been drinking, we didn't have anything illegal on us, but I did still have the machete next to me. Luckily he didn't notice it, and he seemed interested in the story enough. He said, and I quote, "It doesn't really surprise me, I've heard lots of stories of weird stuff happening up there." He told us to have a nice night and let us go. I don't think we'll ever be visiting Indian Canyon, ever again, let alone camping anytime soon. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true camping stories sent in by viewers just like you. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to let me know by hitting that like button and commenting down below which one was your favorite. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. These were some genuinely freaky stories. I don't know what these people are encountering out there in the woods, but next time I go camping, I'm gonna have to keep an extra eye out, that's for sure. You can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and pretty much everywhere else you listen to podcasts online. You can find Swamp Dweller t-shirts, face masks, and more in the link in the description. You can go to teespring.com/swampdwellermerch. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp the way you do. I couldn't be doing this on a daily basis without all of you guys, so thank you so much. And I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.